6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
How about we do it again?
6, 7, 4, 3, 2, 1. I think I farted.
Okay, let's try one more
I
time.
definitely
Ready?
Ranking review. Ranking review. Ranking review.
Say 6,
6,
5.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome to the 248th episode of Rank and Review. You are hearing the voice of your host and random Canadian Larry Parsons, and we're going to dig into some H P Lovecraft this episode. It also marks the long-awaited return of Jeremy Cook. It's been great to catch up with him and see him again, and I think we got some good stuff to put into your ears, so enjoy, but do so with the understanding that there may be some swears and some spoilers for the 6 H P Lovecraft themed movies that we discuss. You can send your feedback to ranknreview@gmail.com. That's ranknreview@gmail.com. The website is ranknreview.ca. Thank you so much for listening to Rank and Review. We're starting to wrap up this 10th season, so until the episode 250, we'll be dropping every other Wednesday. And when the new season starts up, we will continue to drop every other Wednesday. Thank you so much. Now let's get into the darkness and the strangeness that is H P Lovecraft. It's been a long time, and I'm so happy to have Mr. Jeremy Cook back on Rank and Review. I mean, we've had trials, we've had COVID, we've suffered personal losses, and it's just not been workable to get together and do this in a very long time. So, Jeremy Cook, welcome back to Rank and Review, and it is lovely to see you.
It has been a long 6 years. That's how long it's been.
Has it been 6 years since you've done a show?
I believe so, yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just got caught up in various things after COVID and parenting, most of them, parenting related. Thank you, sons. But here I am now doing the thing I said I was going to do 6 years ago.
H P Lovecraft. I have this memory that once upon a time I gave you an old paperback of H P Lovecraft stories, when we were teenagers, thinking that maybe Jeremy might like this. Am I inventing that?
I think it was when I was in my 20s.
It was your 20s? Okay.
Yeah, and I remember this would have been probably around 2000 or so when I read my first Lovecraft. And in those days, he was just not as accessible as he is today. I remember, I can't remember if it was you that gave me the book or if it was my cousin Brendan or somebody, but it was an old book passed to me from one of my friends, kind of like The King in Yellow or Necronomicon would be.
Yeah.
And it seemed like it was a secret thing, like it was our own personal discovery at the time.
Forbidden knowledge.
Yeah, there was so few other people at the time that were reading Lovecraft, and it seemed like a personal discovery as well. But things changed since then. The great nerdening happened.
Yes.
When it suddenly, in sometime in the aughts, nerds became cool, right? There was jocks that were the a-holes, and
middle-aged men will proudly play D&D now and not be ashamed of it, whereas when we were in high school and university age, we might play D&D, but we wouldn't fucking tell anybody.
Exactly. Nerds hid,
yeah,
for their own safety. Do you know the Strauss-Howe generational theory? It's a theory that I don't actually believe in, but basically that history is divided into generations that repeat over and over and over again. And
we're back to nerd generation?
Well, they say there's going to be a fourth turning with lots of upheaval and stuff like that. Personally, I think it's already happened.
Right.
And it was that time when, for a brief span in history, my values were the values of the world, sort of culminating around the time that Scott Pilgrim versus the World came out, actually. I see the movie over there.
And it reminds you of those halcyon days.
Yes.
Well,
but during that time, Lovecraft became a much more mainstream as well. And I was playing board games with the Lovecraft mythos, and the bookstore started selling him again. And
Hellboy had a very Lovecraftian antagonist. Matt and I reviewed on the show a little while ago this movie called Underwater, where inexplicably the big bad in the third act is revealed to be Cthulhu.
Wow.
He came right out of nowhere, but there he was. So,
okay.
It's definitely creeping. And with the way I got into it, I was big into Stephen King and into horror movies, and I kept on running into these people who would say, there's a real Lovecraftian thing happening here. And I wanted to know what they meant by that. And I think typically what someone means by that, Lovecraftian, is like you're dealing with something that is so ancient and so unfathomable that we can't even grasp it, let alone face it or fight it. It's like an ancient, huge evil that to us we're just like a speck in the wind by comparison.
Well,
and
yeah.
Kicking down that door and seeing into that world is why most of Lovecraft characters end up rendered completely insane. Like, they just can't handle the new reality.
I've actually broken it down here in my notes here as best I can, the facets of Lovecraft stories, which any good movie, I feel, should have. Some of them are related. First,
right.
You have the existential dread. So that's, I think Stephen King at one point said, existential dread is take something, anything at the room, point at it and say, there's something wrong with that.
Right.
It's the idea that your perception of reality is flawed and that you're actually in mortal danger from things that you can't understand.
You think your car is safe, but your car is not safe.
Yes, and particularly with Lovecraft, once you've learned the part of the truth, you kind of want to investigate it, but you also kind of don't, because the truth may drive you mad and unleash terrible things.
Yeah.
The next facet would be weirdness. This is a huge problem with most Lovecraftian movies, is that how do you get that weirdness on film?
It's to pay a compliment to someone I usually shit talk. You almost need a David Lynchian aspect to your movie. That's just like, what the hell was that?
Yes.
And it's a hard thing to put your finger on. And when people are good at it, they tend to overplay the scale. They just put too much onto it, and then it stops having meaning. It needs to be weird enough to fuck with me, but not linger enough to ruin the proceedings.
And not so weird that it makes you laugh, too. Right? I think in The Mouth of Madness, which we reviewed 6 years ago, did this pretty well, where they showed the old ones in the background, and they were all out of focus. You couldn't really see what was going on.
Just a noise of limbs and mouths in no kind of coherent order.
Yes. So next is the fragility of human civilization.
We think we got this all figured out.
Yes, but in fact we are just complacent, and evil cults are menacing us and our institutions who are devotees of the dark gods, which, if they looked our direction, if they felt like it, could just topple us over.
All of creation could be spattered like a bug on a windshield at any second.
Correct. Next is a grounding in place and history. A good H P Lovecraft story has to have a long expository section that takes place in the past, in my opinion.
Lovecraft stories are never one story. They're there are 12 stories sort of sandwiched into one story. This guy found this book, and then he gifted it to this guy, who then discovered its true meaning and gave it to this professor, who's now telling us this story.
That's right. Or the old man who knows what's really going on in the village. And then the last thing is madness and trauma. Our characters cannot come out of the story unscathed. They have to be institutionalized, or not go down into subway systems ever again, or wake up screaming at night.
They might save the world, but rarely do they save themselves.
So as we look at these movies, I'm going to be thinking about all of those things and whether or not they succeeded in their goals of capturing that Lovecraft feeling that I love so much.
Well, that would cover my first question then, which was going to be exactly that. What do you want out of a Lovecraft adaptation? So let's move on to the second one.
Okay.
And we talked about this a little bit before we hit record. Lovecraft was a terrible human being.
Correct.
I think we can be fair, and it's not even just about the racism, although that's a big one for a lot of people. That, like, he was one of these, like, rich people who looked down on the lower classes and looked down on anybody that was less cultured or less perfect or less white than he was. And in that sort of way that was so infuriating, because all he ever did with his time was live off of his family's wealth and write. He never had a job. He never did anything. And while he, lived off of the backs of everyone else, this opulent lifestyle, he thumbed his nose at all the other, people beneath him. And that is not something worthy of respect. Like, I don't think I would like Lovecraft the person, but I don't think that means we need to not look at Lovecraft as, like, something that is very interesting in his storytelling. It's not just that they've entered the public domain that's got the increased interest in Lovecraft. I think that the interest has always been there. And just because you can get the rights for no money doesn't mean that you can do it. Lovecraft is such a hard thing to tackle that, James Cameron and Guillermo del Toro were going to try to crack in the Mountains of Madness, and never happened. Like,
when Tom Cruise was attached to the project.
Tom Cruise was even, But still, just how they're going to sell that story to the major audience, how they're going to, like, approach the visuals of it, there's just a tough nut to crack, right? So a lot of the stuff that I really like, instead of being direct Lovecraft adaptations, are sort of borrowing from Lovecraft. One of the first areas that I noticed Lovecraft, where I bumped into Lovecraft before I knew Lovecraft, the Savage Sword of Conan the Barbarian.
The author of whom was touched during his lifetime by Lovecraft.
Yes. And he was given permission to use Cthulhu in some of the stories. So there are stories of Conan fighting these Cthulhu cults. When I was reading the comic book, it was just Conan fighting another adversary. But going back on it now, how cool is that? Like, would I watch a movie of Conan fighting a Cthulhu cult? Yes, Jeremy. Yes, I would.
Yeah.
But I just know. Yes, I acknowledge that Lovecraft the man is problematic, and I would not like that person. But no, I don't think that means that we should dismiss the work. And I honestly am confused as to why that's a serious conversation.
Well, I mean, if you wanted to get really progressive, then you might take Lovecraft's side and say, oh, well, he was really, really mentally ill. And this is a distinct voice of a mentally ill person that we're seeing on the page when we read him. It does blow my mind to read these stories and get a sense of the person behind them as someone that would be pretty unpleasant to be around, really closeted, but at the same time, reading a Lovecraft story for the first time several times opened a huge hole in my head, metaphorically, and left me disturbed in a way that few other things I've read have ever done.
When I read a Stephen King story and it gets to me, I usually know why. There's like, that was kind of an interesting idea that he was playing with there, that was a really grim fate, or that was just that was pretty ugly. That was an ugly story that you just told me, and that's sticking with me. The thing about Lovecraft is that I'd walk away with it and I'd be thinking about the story, but I would never really be able to put my finger on the precise thing that did it. Just this cumulative effect. This guy was digging up in ancient ruins in the middle of an ancient desert, and terrible shit happened to him. And any one page of it didn't necessarily shake me, but altogether, we get this Lovecraftian vibe that is so discussed. And that's what Jeremy and I are here to talk about today.
Quick.
Yes.
Top 3 Lovecraft stories for you.
Of the written work or the adaptations?
Written work.
Ugh. I guess I'll say The Mountains of Madness, Shadows over Innsmouth, and The Thing on the Doorstep.
Yeah, I'm going to go Hound, Shadow over Innsmouth, and Thing on the Doorstep as well. Those are my favorites.
So we match.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. All right. Well, I don't think that's controversial choices necessarily. And I'm not sure that I've read all of it. I have a couple of collected works, but they both have different collections of stories within them, so I'm not sure if I'm complete in my Lovecraft. But and again, Matt and I talked about this. A lot of the times it is I appreciate the influence of Lovecraft as much as Lovecraft himself. Is there anything you would like to say before we list off these 6 movies of adaptations of H P Lovecraft and review them? Or
I'm done.
Let's do it. We're going to start with The Resurrected and director Dan O'Bannon. Then we're going to look at an anthology picture from the early 90s called Necronomicon. And then we have Cast a Deadly Spell, which is not necessarily based off of a Lovecraft story directly, but it is very much Lovecraft universe. Picture Roger Rabbit, only instead of animated creatures, supernatural entities. Then we're going to talk about The Lurking Fear, which is a full moon feature presentation, very micro budget. I was talking about how low budget enterprises like to do Lovecraft because they don't have to pay for the story. This is the outcome. Recently we have Nicolas Cage did a starring role in The Color Out of Space, which has got a lot of cult following around it. It's interesting. I think this is the horror movie that we all wanted to be the greatest horror movie of the decade. It's interesting, but we'll get to it. And then we're gonna finish things off with a brand new watch. Jeremy and I just watched The Resonator, Mystikonic University, so we'll have that right fresh, piping hot out of the oven for you guys to listen to. As usual, there will be swears, there will be spoilers.
Then, from the author of Terror, H P Lovecraft. From the director of Return of the Living Dead.
There's no evil in what I do, so long as I do it rightly.
The Resurrected.
I have struck depths that your little brain cannot fathom.
He lived centuries ago.
It is to be expected. The dead take much blood.
But for him, death was only the beginning.
The cops found 8, count them, 8 boxes of human remains. Turns out they've had a rash of tomb snatchings over in Europe.
Now this wizard from the past.
Don't you understand what's going on down here, Lonnie? He beat death.
Has teamed with a man from the present.
He's talking about bringing people back from the dead.
To create an evil that will last forever.
As the hunger grows, my control will surely weaken.
The best we can hope for is to somehow diminish Charles's homicidal and cannibalistic impulses. The curse of the formerly dead is the hunger, and it will not be denied.
Chris Sarandon of Fright Night and Child's Play.
I have drawn down demons from the stars. There'll be no salvation for thee.
John Terry of In Country and Full Metal Jacket. Jane Sibbett of television's The Famous Teddy Z.
The destinies of all things, living and dead, are mine.
The Resurrected.
So, this was 1991, The Resurrected. I lied in the introduction when I implied this was an 80s movie. I'm terribly, terribly sorry. The funny thing is at the time when I would have first seen this movie, it would not have been H P Lovecraft that brought me to this movie. Believe it or not, it would have been Dan O'Bannon. Dan O'Bannon worked with John Carpenter, like they went to school together. They did that Dark Star movie together. He did a draft of Alien. Although in his version of Alien, they were all men, and apparently the alien didn't pop out of anybody's chest. So his script was very different than the one we saw, but still having Alien as a credit on your CV, definitely helped him as a career. And then in the middle of the 80s, he made Return of the Living Dead, which is, I'm sorry, amazing. It's just an amazing movie. I love that movie. I will always love that movie.
A formative movie for you.
Yes, I have strong feelings about it. Mm-hmm. And he wrote this absolutely insane science fiction movie that was based off of a novel, Space Vampires, called Life Force. And he's just crazy. Everything is on the table for this guy. So he's making another movie. It's The Resurrected. Let's check it out. And at the time, I remember thinking, it's okay, I guess. But it was nowhere near as crazy and out there to me as Return of the Living Dead. Watching it now, that's kind of its strength. Of all the Lovecraft adaptations that we're talking about here, in a weird way, the Dan O'Bannon one is the most straight-faced and, serious about it. They are here to do a serious take on H P Lovecraft, and it's not about wowing you or dazzling you or grossing you out. It's about trying to tell this story in as straight-faced a manner as possible, which was the last thing I would have expected from Dan O'Bannon. And over and above that, it actually works pretty well. I would say that if there's a problem with the movie is that it might make you wait longer than you want to get to the meat and potatoes of the creature feature stuff. But if you're into Lovecraft, you'll know it's coming, so you'll be comforted along the path.
I was very concerned going into it on the first watch.
Right.
It's clearly set in the early 90s. You can tell by everybody's hairstyle and clothes, and there's kind of shitty ADR in there. And I was concerned, okay, it looks like we're going to have another cheapo Lovecraft coming at us right now without the... it's going to try and show us the weirdness without the budget necessary to show us the weirdness. But it ended up being a pretty solid show.
When the weirdness comes, which maybe not as much as you want it to be, I think it looks fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that gets dragged out of the river and put on the bank that they show, I haven't really talked about plot yet, but this experiment gets washed down the river and the villagers discover it and they pull it out of the water. And this is not a CGI effect. This is all a created, mechanical puppet. And it looks fantastic. And when you finally get a good look at it and the camera closes in on it, it pays off better than you would have expected it to, frankly.
The early 90s was in a very magical time for practical effects and gross stuff. Let's talk about the plot. Okay. You want to take a stab at it?
Well, it's based off of the strange case of Charles Dexter Ward.
The case of Charles Dexter Ward.
And this guy is investigating... what's the name of the actor? Sorry. Oh my God. This is what it is. Chris Sarandon. Mm-hmm. Chris Sarandon is this very enigmatic, strange millionaire person living in this spooky house. And he's been acting really strange. His wife is concerned about him. And we're investigating what is up. What has caused this sea change in his character. Nothing evil or Lovecraftian, obviously. So this investigator gets caught up into this thing, and it seems like there's a deep history going back into generations, and that maybe this man isn't who he says he is. He's the continuation of another person. And it's sort of based on a series of reveals. And if you've read Lovecraft, there's a crypt under the house, and there's weird things to be discovered within there. And it goes back generationally. We're going to bump into this again and again today. People coming to a place that it turns out is their origin.
Mm-hmm. Has a lot of history in it.
Yeah. So does this connect to anybody of the players that we have here? And what is the secret that the Chris Sarandon character is hiding? That is, I guess, the focus of the story. But you're not getting the sort of gore and the, throats being ripped out that you would expect from the guy who brought you Return of the Living Dead. It is more of a procedural until it gets to the Lovecraftian stuff.
Mm-hmm. Chris Sarandon is pretty good in this.
He's generally pretty good, actually, I think.
Mm-hmm. I think there's a great moment when they actually run into him, when he's possessed by his ancestor. And he does seem to be a completely different person, speaking with his colonial dialect. And there's something very creepy about him and off-putting that I quite enjoyed.
And Sarandon seems to like the horror genre. Like, he did Child's Play and, like, Fright Night, and, like, he doesn't seem to turn his nose up at these sorts of projects the way some sort of, quote, legit actors will. If it's a good role, he wants it.
Yes. I guess, you're saying that it does revolve around Chris Sarandon, and I think that's maybe one of the weaknesses of this movie is our main investigator, John March, is his character's name.
John Tenney is the actor.
Yes. He doesn't seem...
John Terry.
He doesn't seem to do a whole lot in the plot. He witnesses it, and he revolves around it. He plays a minor role in the final scene before Chris Sarandon basically destroys himself in skeleton form.
Yeah.
But he is not really in the movie that much. That's my only problem with the plot.
I remember people talking about revisionist history of Raiders of the Lost Ark. Indiana Jones doesn't really do anything in that movie. Like, he fails to steal the Ark away from the Nazis, and then the Nazis open the Ark and kill themselves. That's basically what Indy did in that movie. Right?
At the end, yes, I suppose so.
But that doesn't bother me because, again, it's the journey as far as I'm concerned. It was an awesome adventure while he was getting there. This is not an epic adventure. This is a story that he witnessed, and this is one of the problems, I think, with adapting Lovecraft. A lot of the times you have an old intellectual recounting a story that he has uncovered. Not even necessarily that he's witnessed, that he's uncovered in some cases, right? So you're hearing his interpretation of a story, second or third hand. And how does that translate to cinema? It doesn't have to be a stone-faced investigator who doesn't contribute much, but he is an audience surrogate, and I think he does well enough for that. But I would agree, if there was a little more interest in that character, a little bit more spice to him, somehow it could help the first act of this movie.
Yes. Or just have him do just a little bit more to move the plot forward. Big points for this movie for having a long expository section that takes place in the colonial era in America.
It was necessary.
And I enjoyed that quite a bit. And they got some great practical effects during that sequence and some decent costumes as well, which I was not expecting going into the movie, seeing the set that they were shooting on in the office.
There was a bit of money in this. Not a ton, but a bit of money in this. But that makes a difference, especially in those flashback sequences. You see this all the time with, like, nouveau westerns, where everybody's dressed in Western gear, but everything looks brand fucking new, and crisp and clean and seams and like, no, right? Like,
this was just sewed yesterday. No one's worn it before this take.
Ever. And you do run into that, and I don't think, like, I wasn't distracted by that here. But that is something that you'll definitely run into when cheaper productions try to pull the shit off with Lovecraft. It's just like, and it's in this non-specific, we are in ancient times. Take off your wristwatch, okay? Seriously.
So to sum up for me, it seemed like it was a shaky start, but it ended up being a pretty authentic adaptation of The Case of Charles Dexter Ward, and I would watch it again.
It's for a patient viewer, I will say that. Considering the madness that we're going to be talking about moving forward in this, a lot of these things are kind of like wall-to-wall creature and holy shit. I think this is probably most genuine in tone to the adaptation of an H P Lovecraft movie, but it is not my favorite H P Lovecraft movie. But maybe if H P Lovecraft could watch it, it would be his. That's not true. He would hate everything. And nothing would be as good as the words that he wrote on the page. But you know what I'm saying. Like, these other movies have a sense of humor, and the craziness sometimes spills over to absurdity in a good way. But that's maybe more the cinema world than it is the Lovecraft world. And I think this one, by keeping a straight face, by keeping it as a horror movie, and again, by making those practical effects spare enough so that when they show up, they really pay off. You get your money's worth. I feel like if they'd opened with these scenes, and they would have lost their impact somehow.
Indeed.
So, solid.
What I'd say further is I wouldn't recommend it to someone who doesn't enjoy Lovecraft that much. It's just like I wouldn't rush off and say, for instance, to my wife, "Oh, you got to watch this."
Yeah.
I would, if I knew they were reading Lovecraft, I would say, try the case of Charles Dexter Ward that's been adapted into Resurrected.
Yeah. I mean, and it slipped through a lot of people's fingers. A lot of people missed this one, but it's not one of those ones where I don't understand why people didn't find this movie. Like, I get it. This is kind of a deep cut. But the people who will like it a lot.
Indeed.
From the producer of Aliens and Terminator 2, L.A. in 1948.
How is it? Bad. It's always bad. Something's coming, something ugly.
Everyone wanted power.
I'll be in my hands by Thursday and attending a conference, and this volume is the key to my presentation.
A conference that starts at midnight?
Everyone wanted control.
It's in the book. All right here. Promise. Power. Price.
What price? You're gonna be dead, Lovecraft. I'm gonna be on top of the world. That should settle things once and for all about who was smart and who was a chump.
And everyone used magic. Black magic.
The Necronomicon. Must be some book.
Except Detective Lovecraft.
Damn it, Phil, everybody's got to compromise.
That's what I keep hearing.
And what makes you so special?
He's the right guy.
I'm serious.
And why are you wearing that hat?
But it's the wrong time.
Someone's throwing lesser demons at you. You don't even carry a rabbit's foot. I can handle it. Well, I'm not worried about you, Phil. I'm worried about the people who might get in the way.
He's got 48 hours to save the world. Or what's left of it.
Phil, nothing in life's as funny as you think.
Fred Ward.
My collar may be a little frayed. Maybe I need a shoe shine. Nobody's got a mortgage on my soul. I own it. Free and clear.
Cast a Deadly Spell. The HBO original movie.
So Cast a Deadly Spell was actually made for HBO in 1991. And there's no reason for this movie to be as awesome as it is. Really, like, I want to show you on this doll where this movie touched me, Jeremy. I remember I was very young, pretty new to Saskatoon, and my parents had gotten Super Channel basically as a way to salve for me because they knew I was super unhappy about the move, and they knew I loved movies. So we have Super Channel now, Larry. Isn't that nice? I saw a trailer for this, and it looked amazing, but I also, even at that young age, thought, there's no way this movie is going to be as good as that trailer made it look. What we have here is the ever underrated, and may he rest in peace, Fred Ward, playing Detective Lovecraft in a 50s era Los Angeles. It's Chinatown with zombies, gremlins, and Lovecraftian adversaries. He gets wrapped up in a case which digs up his past with an old dame he used to be attached with and his former police partner back in the day, trying to get a hold of this ancient book and how being wrapped up with this eccentric old fella who's very, very obsessed with caring for and looking after the chastity of his teenage daughter. And finding the book and what all these people are fighting over and why is sort of what Lovecraft gets dropped in the middle of. And as far as your detective thrillers, it's got every cliche you could ever have and the cheesiest dialogue that you would ever imagine. Like the police chief has these lines like, it's going to get messy, and I'm the guy who's got to clean it up. Like, the lines are so cheesy that they shouldn't work. But I'm here to tell you, dude, the same magic that was struck in Who Framed Roger Rabbit, as far as I'm concerned, is struck here. Should the weird comedy work in contrast with the noir stuff? Maybe not. And does the fact that everybody constantly underreacts to a world of the supernatural ever get old? It should, but it really never does. And honestly, for 1991, when we get to the big climactic Cthulhu monster showdown, it looks fucking amazing. Like, it is really well rendered. I mean, you're not fooled by the blue screen, and it is a puppet, but, like, it looks awesome to me. Like, this is the kind of movie that, like, made me sort of lock into how much I loved this genre. And it's an invisible movie. It aired on HBO for a year or so, and then it was released quietly on VHS, and then it disappeared. And I'm here to say that someone needs to pull this thing back and release it wide, because it's awesome. Am I overstating the case, Jeremy?
It's pretty good. Every actor that I love is in this movie.
Julianne Moore?
Except for Sean Bean.
Julianne Moore, Clancy Brown,
David Warner.
David Warner, of course. We're going to talk about David Warner today.
And, of course, Fred Ward, who is always just solid in everything that he does.
He may not always be in great movies, but he's never given a shitty performance that I've seen. Ever.
Yeah. And Julianne Moore she's young again, and she's vivacious and attractive. Clancy Brown is threatening, like he always is. And David Warner is one of those actors, he's one of those actors that lends gravitas to whatever he's saying, no matter what dialogue he's given.
Yeah.
When you hear him say it, you're always like, "Oh, yes, sir, Mr. Warner, whatever you say."
If you want someone to deliver you exposition, there's no other actor in Hollywood that could have done it. David Warner's no longer with us, I believe, but
we should check on that.
But the fact is, if you want someone to deliver you the backstory for your adversary, this is the guy to go to every time.
Well, we'll check it up because there's another David Warner movie coming up.
That's
here.
right.
So there are cheesy lines in it, like typical film noir lines as well, but
deliberately so.
It's well written as well. I like it when Lovecraft makes fun of Clancy Brown and says that he's smoking a chair leg.
Yes,
as in standing for a cigar, and nobody in the show is ever doing something that's like, why are they doing that? Right. That makes no sense to me. Everyone's motivations are clear. And you completely understand why everybody's doing everything, including when the dame double crosses everybody, of course.
Shocker. And again, I can see someone taking it apart on that level. Yeah, the dialogue is cheesy, but I would argue deliberately cheesy, and sometimes deliciously cheesy. Mm-hmm. You're a funny guy, Lovecraft. I bet your dying words are going to be a real scream. Love it. Love it. It's a little bit cheesy, but it knows it. And it's sort of playing this line of being serious but not serious. And if at any point they tip their hand all the way, it would become ridiculous, and then it would fall apart. But if they played it so seriously that we couldn't smile at it, then we'd be like, ugh. It's a pretty delicate balance to find, and there's only a few things that shook me out. There's Julianne Moore clearly lip syncing to the songs, she's not singing these songs, and it's pretty obvious that she's not singing the song. It doesn't really sound like her, and they go back to it a couple of times. If there'd just been that one scene, I might have let it go, but it seems like there's a couple of times they go back to that club and she's still singing that same song, and it's still not super convincing me that it's her. Strangely, same thing happens in Dark City with Jennifer Connelly playing a similar type of role, singing in the she's credible except for when she sings for some reason.
I don't know, maybe that's a thing in movies I haven't seen that took place long ago. The weirdness in this movie is accomplished through puppets.
Yeah.
Some of them look pretty good, and some of them are very, very silly. The gargoyle looks pretty silly, and that gremlin there's an extended scene where someone's chasing a gremlin around with a
he's
shotgun.
Just trying to get information out of this mechanic, but the whole time the mechanic is distracted trying to kill these gremlins that are fucking with his car. And I thought it was hilarious. They do look like they're out of a kid's movie in that particular scene, they could have come out of the Labyrinth or something like this. But or the fact that the Clancy Brown stops hiring henchmen and instead uses zombies. They go off after a few months, but you don't have to worry about them, being disloyal.
Yes. So with the puppets, I mean, they look pretty good to me because I'm a child of the 80s, and from the Muppets were everywhere, and Return of the Jedi, there's just puppets everywhere. And I like them. I wonder if I show this movie to My children, when they're older,
will they like it?
Well, they like the puppets. Will they say they looked good, or will they just say, "No, that's dumb"?
They will clock that the special effects looks different, but upon showing my kids things, stuff that have been like hesitant about showing them, I have been surprised at how receptive they have been.
Mm-hmm.
So. A lot of times, if you're a kid and your parents make you sit down and watch something, you're just open to it. Whether you're consciously, willingly making yourself that way or not, you just open yourself to it.
I remember when my son was 5, we were watching Raiders of the Lost Ark, and with that famous scene where...
People's face melted?
No, it's the one where he goes underneath the truck and it's in motion.
Right.
With that famous stunt.
Right.
And he says to me, "Dad, this looks real to me." And I'm like, yeah, not everything was CGI in any point of history. This was an
5,
actual...
That is very telling. And so true, though. Like, you can tell that the physics are off sometimes. I feel like we're getting off of the topic a little bit, but there are puppets in this movie, and they look like puppets, but they are also real tactile things that the actors were interacting with.
Correct.
And usually, even if it's good CGI, we clock that. That's why you need amazing actors in Jurassic Park, right? Because they're not acting against anything. Like, they have to sell the shit out of it. Those gremlins were in the room with the actors, and the actors knew what they looked like and knew how ridiculous they were, and their underreaction to them makes it so awesome. Like,
indeed.
That this is just another thing that you deal with every day. Sometimes gremlins get into the engine of your car and you gotta shoot them. It's sort of like Muppet World or Roger Rabbit World, where the world seemed so complete that I almost wanted to live in it. Like, how awesome would it be if you, like, hailed a cab and there was a puppet bear driving the car? Like, I would tip that dude, man. This is a world I could get behind.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't lose the Lovecraft in here. Like, there is a very serious... The book is the Necronomicon, and there is an alignment of planets that happens every 666 years that's going to allow them to open this doorway. And
the god they're summoning is Yog-Sothoth,
yes.
who is the same god that they try to summon in the Dunwich Horror, which we also reviewed 6 years ago.
I mean, I know it's not an According to Hoyle adaptation of Lovecraft, but as far as I'm concerned, close enough.
There is a little problem with the ending in that it is, at least I found it really predictable, that, spoiler, the virgin ended up not being a virgin by the time the ritual came around.
But you know what makes it work for me?
Tell me.
It's Fred Ward's reaction to it. I totally saw it coming. You saw it coming. Most people watching the movie. This teenage girl needs to be kept a virgin in order for the sacrifice to work. And this cop has been in charge of looking after her, and we know that something's happened between the two of them. But Fred Ward wants to give this guy a medal for sleeping with this teenage girl. Like, statutory rape, and you saved the world. Like, we should make a statue to it. I don't know. It's a little bit gray area, but I found it funny.
It was 1991.
It was 91. You could get away with that kind of joke.
Let's move on.
So there's nothing else you want to say about Cast a Deadly Spell?
I don't think so. Another solid show that I enjoyed.
If you can get your hands to it, because it's not easy to find. But I treasure it.
Be there when the fabled Necronomicon unleashes his ancient, deadly secrets. To walk upon the earth once again. 3 nightmares calculated to keep you sleepless forever. You are not alone. Necronomicon, starring Richard Lynch, Bruce Payne, Belinda Bauer, David Warner, Signe Coleman, and Jeffrey Combs as H P Lovecraft. Necronomicon, the Book of the Dead. See it if you dare.
So Necronomicon is a weird one. 3 different countries were involved in financing it. France, China, and America, I believe. And 3 different directors were involved. Christoph Gans, who did Brotherhood of the Wolf and Silent Hill, and is apparently just finishing up a sequel to Silent Hill that disregards the sequel to Silent Hill that already exists. Whatever. Too much information. But he's an interesting visual director. And then we've got Brian Usna, who Matthew and I recently talked about when he was on the podcast. He did a movie called Progeny, but he also did Return of the Living Dead 3, and a lot of these like low-budget, really sort of over-the-top Stuart Gordon-esque movies. And then the third director, most interestingly, who's the one I'm the least familiar with, he's from China, I want to say. Shizuke Kaneko?
Sounds Japanese.
Shizuke, yeah. Gesundheit. Forgive me. To anybody who knows how that's meant to be pronounced, I apologize too.
Cancelled.
Yeah, but he couldn't even speak English as he was directing his segment. The second segment, the cold. And so there was a real barrier between he and the cast.
Interesting.
I know the work of the other directors, but not him. Even looking at his IMDb page, I'm not sure why he was sort of lumped in with these guys. So it was released theatrically pretty much everywhere except for the United States and Canada for some reason. It was released direct-to-video here. So again, a more obscure title. But they are doing 3 legit H P Lovecraft stories. How well they're adapting them can be discussed a story at a time, but they're not necessarily just inspired by Lovecraft. They are trying to do Lovecraft stories. And the whole wraparound is very strange because we have Jeffrey Combs made up to look like H P Lovecraft, but who ends up looking more like Bruce Campbell. So people think that Bruce Campbell's in this movie, but it's actually Jeffrey Combs made up to look like H P Lovecraft, which consequently made him look like Bruce Campbell. Oh. He's going to this ancient forbidden library to read from the Necronomicon, and these stories that we are presented with are the stories that he reads.
So we get 4 reviews for the price of 1 in this movie.
Look at us go. And so, to that end, I guess we'll just go in order. Christoph Gantz's segment stars Alexander Payne, I believe the name is of the actor. I don't know whatever happened to this guy. He seemed to do a lot of work in the 90s, and then he's just sort of vanished. But he's coming back to a family estate, and he's going to become aware of an ancient legacy shared by his bloodline. Very familiar Lovecraftian story. What did you think of the first story? We'll just take this as a story at a time, I think.
Yeah, let's do that. This was a very meh entry for me. They had a long expository bit in the past, which I always like about Lovecraft things, but it didn't make any sense to me because it clearly said this happened 60 years in the past, yet we see our hero getting dropped off in the 1970s car,
yes,
which means it should be 1910 at the very earliest. Yet we're seeing sailing ships and waistcoats and bloodletting, which indicates 18th and early 19th centuries.
This is the thing I was talking about, like with low-budget Lovecraft. Like, you run into problems here.
Mm-hmm. It was a cool-looking Deep One that came in. So yes, basically the plot is that Deep Ones try to convince our people to resurrect their loved ones from the dead. It goes unsuccessfully the first time in the past, and then it is once again unsuccessful the second time with our grieving hero who's trying to bring back his girl.
Yeah. What I think is interesting to me about this segment is the combination of the effects, because we get a marriage of cool practical effects and shitty CGI.
Indeed.
And it really showcases why the practical effects are the way to go with these types of stories every single time. There's a scene where this tentacle has created a puppet version of his lost love, and she's approaching him and they're getting pretty intimate. It's getting kind of gross and tentacle porny. But the second he fights and the creature turns back into the CGI tentacle, the tension is lost from the scene. I was with it and believing it enough, and then she turned into the tentacle and slid away in a very cartoon manner.
Indeed.
The same weird thing happens in Dagon, which is a movie I love, the Stuart Gordon adaptation of In His Mouth, whereas there's really amazing practical special effects, and there's some truly terrible CGI.
Tragic CGI that ruins the movie a lot of the time.
So I think that this first story is a microcosm of the Dagon problem. Whereas I'll give Dagon a pass because I think there's enough good in that movie. This first story, not quite.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not enough to sink the ship.
The final fight is a sink shipper, though, is it not? Or a ship sinker, I should say.
I'm talking about the whole movie.
Ah, I see what you're saying.
Like, there's some problematics. This is not where I would have opened with this story, but it's a bumpy ride. But it's the first story. I would not say to throw in the towel just yet.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, a weird final fight that didn't make a whole lot of sense to me in that one. Although I will mention a good thing in it. I like his girl saying, "I'm tired of blowing bubbles,"
yes,
which is a callback to "Oh My Darling Clementine," I would assume. Let's move on to The Cold, which is the second.
Which I assume you like this one because your boy's in it. Another investigator is trying to figure out what's going on in this strange apartment where some experiments are going on and the temperature is being kept deliberately chilled. For whatever reason could it possibly be? Could it have something to do with the ancient forbidden science and the legacy of evil? Maybe.
This is a direct adaptation of the Cool Air.
Yes.
What was the first one supposed to be an adaptation of, other than having deep ones? I couldn't figure that out. I was thinking Rats in the Walls, but no, that's too squiddly for that one.
It says The Rats in the Walls, Cool Air, and The Whisper in Darkness are the three stories that were being adapted.
Okay.
So I guess that was a very loose attempt at Rats in the Walls.
Okay. All right, so the Cool Air's adaptation gets the most faithful representation, but
for sure,
not that faithful anyway.
Mm-hmm.
In this one, it suffers from a problem of not having any likable characters. But you do get to see some interesting science experiments that are very, very creepy and make your skin crawl.
Yeah.
That's all I have to say about this one. David Warner is awesome as usual.
David Warner is who I would want to highlight in this role. The investigator, again, sort of like John Terry in the first movie, I just didn't invest with her.
Mm-hmm.
Which made the twist kind of suck. I think if we would have liked her or cared about her, then when she ends up, having to carry on the evil legacy, we might feel something or feel for her.
Yes.
But because we don't like her, we're kind of indifferent to the turn. I also like the actor who sort of plays the sucker who gets to be the next victim at the end of the short. He was in the original miniseries of It. He played the older version of Eddie Kasparek in it.
Okay.
He's just kind of an interesting face to see, and I think he's doing a decent enough job with the hand he's been dealt here. Mm-hmm. He's in the sucker role. He thinks he knows everything. He knows nothing.
Indeed.
But David Warner basically giving some pathos to this guy doing a lot of evil things, and the sort of technical ick of his thaw, I thought was worth the price of admission.
It looked pretty good when he melts.
That's right. Yeah. So for me, this was another step up. We kind of started meh. Now we're that's okay.
Yeah.
And now, or is there more you want to say about the Cold?
I think I'm done with the Cold.
So, yeah, Brian Usna, was a longtime friend of Stuart Gordon. He produced Stuart's films, and Stuart produced his. Like, they were creatively tied together, and they seem to have a similar madness in their approach, because there's some icky stuff that we'd seen leading up to this, but this third story, like, it goes off the rails and to a complete different level of holy shit that we're not expecting, that, as far as I'm concerned, elevates the entire proceedings of what it came before. I was not ready for how fucking crazy this third story got.
Nor was I, and it was not exactly welcome either.
Okay.
My issue with the third story, called Whispers,
right,
is that there is no plot to it. It's basically a young lady is tortured psychologically and physically to death.
Two police officers chase someone into a sewer, and it gets darker and grosser and darker and grosser and darker and grosser and grosser and grosser and grosser, and then it ends.
Yes. Yeah. And yeah, that's all there is, and it just makes you feel sick in your stomach every new gross turn that's shown to you.
You just think it couldn't get worse for her, and then it gets worse for her.
Yeah, give the lady a chance. Give her, just let her shotgun one of those annoying people, right?
Yeah.
Just one of them, and then we can say, yeah, no, she can get out of here, and then cut her legs off, and then have these bat creatures drink the marrow out of it.
Yuzna did this movie, probably just a few years before this, called Society. Mm-hmm. About how the rich feed on the poor in a very literal way. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but there's this infamous shunting sequence where all the rich people literally turn into one globby monster together, and they feed on the help. That's what they do. Right. The movie has got lots of problems with it, but the ick and the holy shit special effects, like, wow, I don't know what I just saw. He kind of recreated that here for me. I agree with you that it is unbelievably dark, and it's interesting to me how maybe that's why they made the decision. The first story arguably has a positive ending. The second story has a not good, but maybe not exactly the evil continues type of ending, right? Mm-hmm. This third ending is just the bleakest fucking thing you could possibly imagine. Like,
yeah.
It's just like almost comically over the top. Like, wow, you guys.
Yeah. So I have a problem with maybe, depending on what message the person is trying to portray in the subtext of this show, there's two things I want to bring up. Maybe you can shed some light.
Okay.
And maybe you can't. We'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens. Roll the dice.
What message is this movie trying to give us about abortion? Because the lady is pregnant when she goes down into the tunnels, and she's thinking of aborting her fetus. And
do you think this is all a judgment on her for that?
I think there's some kind of punishment going on, or they keep talking about how she's an unfit mother, and then at the end they remove her fetus and put her in one of the annoying people. Is that correct? Or
it's just sort of carried off. No good fate is going to happen to that. I don't know why the writer would include it if it wasn't a judgment on her in some way. So I guess I understand what you're coming from, but. For me, it was a classic Lovecraftian fate. The second she entered that sewer, it was over. There was nothing she or anyone could do. Whether it was her fate that happened or it was just bad luck, we don't know. But I think for me, the point is once she lost the light to her back, it was over for her. And there is maybe a pointlessness to that. It's sort of like a slasher movie where everybody dies and then the killer walks into the woods and they roll credits. It was and just doesn't really feel satisfying somehow.
Well, even Lovecraft knows enough to say if things are going to get bad at the end, to say it looked like we were going to escape, but then we didn't. Right? So you don't know exactly what the filmmakers would be saying about
I would say the author, the screenplay probably had that in mind, but I didn't really feel Yuzna's not about subtext. I really don't think he is. Like I say, society is literally the rich feeding on the poor. It's not subtext, it's text, right? Yeah. I think he's about making it disturbing visually, viscerally, and violent. Maybe the screenplay wanted that, but I didn't feel it. I just thought it added to the horror that on top of everything else, on top of being drawn quarter, eaten alive, she was pregnant. How can we make it worse, right?
Yeah. Okay, so the second thing, maybe you can call me crazy if you think this isn't true. Mm-hmm. The two super annoying people in this that keep leading her further and further underground and irritating her and psychologically torturing her seemed really Jewish to me.
Okay.
And it seemed like it was some sort of a comment, I don't know what kind of comment it would be, on the old blood libel medieval Jewish rumors were going around that Jews would trick people into falling into wells and killing them and drinking their blood and stuff like that.
Well, I didn't take it that way. The way I sort of saw it is, as fucked up as they were quote unquote her attachment to the real, and as things got deeper into the darkness and into the sewer, their masks were slipping more. Like, they seemed a little bit more real world at first, but as things progressed, they seemed less good at, hiding the fact that they were clearly part of the problem. Mm-hmm. And it just sort of added to the absurdity. Like, what are these two people, like, what part could they be playing in this bizarre fucking orchestra? Like, what are they doing here? And the fact that it's not like a fleshless beast, she like locks onto them somehow as like this island of reality in this ocean of madness, but they are not a safety for her. And even on some level, she knows it. Like, okay, yeah, so I think that is the desired effect, though. Mm-hmm. Like, the credits roll on that story, and you're like, "Fuck, really?" Like, mm-hmm. There's that's where we were going. Wow. And it left an impression. Like, say what you will, Yuzna and Stuart Gordon were both good at this, like, making low-budget, visceral movies. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad, but they weren't forgettable. Somehow they stuck with you. Like, when you watch Castle Freak, it's got problems, right? But you can't unwatch Castle Freak. And that's kind of how I feel about this story. Like, I can't unwatch Whispers.
Well, maybe we'll have to just disagree.
Fair enough. Mm-hmm. Then we get to the wraparound story.
Yeah.
I like Jeffrey Combs. I like H P Lovecraft. This is an uncomfortable marriage.
This is not a great wraparound story. Somehow the wraparound stories never are good in these anthology films, are they?
No.
Can you think of one that was successful, or are they all just kind of like, they always end with, and then they died, or whatever?
I kind of like Creepshow being a comic book, and the payoff with the little kid. It's not amazing, but it doesn't actively suck, which distinguishes it somehow.
Yes. So, yeah, basically, throughout the readings through the Necronomicon, things get increasingly creepier, and then the people in the library try to get him out, and it turns out they're bad, and it ends up in a puppet bad CGI battle.
I did like when he pulled the face off of that one monk-looking dude, and he thought he was dead, but then the face just kept talking to him. But yeah, I don't know, that I thought it was handled strangely, especially because it just interestingly, Jeffrey Combs, I mean, he's known for doing these Lovecraft adaptations, obviously, but he has done a stage production where he's played Edgar Allan Poe, and I've not seen it, but by all accounts, he looks and sounds and carries himself very much like Edgar Allan Poe. Like, apparently it was a very incredible thing. Like, I think they wanted him because he was Jeffrey Combs, and we have that association with Reanimator, but as good as he is, he's not the right guy for this part. Like, he just, he looks strange, and the makeup makes it just come off uncanny somehow. He looks like he should be in Dick Tracy or something, the Warren Beatty Dick Tracy, where everybody had the crazy, like, the whole movie has its ridiculous corners, so nothing is weird enough to sink the ship for me. But yeah, it's rickety for sure.
It's a leaky boat.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Good enough.
Good enough.
We had a deal.
Storm's coming in.
Come on, Father. These damn things have been living under our feet and tearing us apart for 20 years.
I know that better than you.
So, when we're talking about the lurking fear, I want to talk about the importance of the director. Because I am going to tell... This is a terrible movie. It's a thumbs down review. We're gonna start there. But...
That's awfully presumptuous of you.
Yes. But let's say this. Same cast, same script. Stuart Gordon directs it. It's a good movie. I have seen Stuart Gordon work with no budget and work with wonky casts and pull this shit off. And what we have here is a siege. A bunch of people who know that these evil creatures beneath the cemetery are going to be coming up on this night, have prepared for it in vengeance to fight them. And in the backdrop of this, a convoluted story about a missing treasure and these criminals that are trying to force this kid to get the treasure. And all on this one stormy night, they come to this haunted fucking graveyard and fight monsters. What is the goddamn problem here? Ashley Lawrence is a capable actress. I've seen her in Hellraiser movies, and she has been good in other things. She sucks here. Jeffrey Combs is a good actor. I've seen him be good in other movies. He sucks here. But
Vincent Schiavelli
is a good actor, and I actually think he holds his head just above water.
Yep, he steals the show.
Just above water. But honestly, all of the component parts of the movie are here, and it's short. It's like 80 minutes long. Like, monster fight in a graveyard. Don't overthink it. The thing is like, we can go down beat for beat why every scene takes too long, or why some of the acting doesn't work, or how credible or less credible things are, but like, there's no reason for this movie to be as bad as it is. The creature design is amazing. The creatures look really good, I think. But they're not given anything to do or any real character. And the characters' motivations are confused at best. Characters just say dumb lines and wait to die, and when their death comes to them, they seem to welcome it. Like, oh, I'm out of the movie, thank you. But I really genuinely feel like with a few tweaks here, with somebody who cared, that this could have been great. And that is the true outrage of Lurking Fear to me. Not how bad it is, but how, with a little bit of effort, it could have got a passing grade.
Even if you had a good director, the screenplay would still be failing the original Lurking Fear story.
Of course, yes.
Because the original Lurking Fear story takes place in a particular time and place, with history behind it, and it's about a well-to-do, I think, Dutch family that goes off in the countryside and devolves into underground monsters.
Yes.
And this basically subtracts that cool backstory and puts a bunch of people whose motivations are really cloudy and say weird things all the time. You don't understand what the hell they're doing and why they're doing it.
A lot of non sequiturs in this movie.
Yes. And so, adding to the, you know how we were talking about grounding in time and place is really good in a Lovecraft story. Part of the problem with this movie is that it says it's in Massachusetts. It is clearly not. I've never been to Romania, but as soon as I saw that graveyard, I was like, where is this filmed? Like Romania or somewhere? And then I was like, okay, looked at
somewhere in Europe for sure. Yeah,
it just looks like it's in Eastern Europe.
Yeah,
I was right about my guess.
Yes.
And then they say it takes place at Christmas time. Okay, so why is there ripening corn and greenery to be seen? You know,
and when you're distracted enough to be thinking about that. Like, I also thought that was kind of amusing that this was a Christmas movie. And
it's like Die Hard.
Yes.
Everyone has to watch the Lurking Fear
Christmas. It's your penance.
Oh geez, we've been over how bad the dialogue is and the motivations. This is another bone to pick I have. There's just a poor understanding of explosives in this movie. Okay, nobody drives around in a car with sweating dynamite.
Oh, that was hilarious. That was actually, more of that might have helped the movie. Honestly, like when she scraped a bunch of the sweating shit off of the dynamite and then splashed it across the desk and it erupted in flame. And like, what in the fucking world are you doing?
And
what are you doing?
Next question. Who even fucking uses dynamite today? Like, that's like Yosemite Sam explosives, okay? Everybody's using TNT these days. And then last, puddles of gasoline. If you ignite those, they go into flame. They don't cause the whole fucking church to explode. It's just dumb. Dumb movie.
But it takes things that I like and makes them dumb. Like, Jeffrey Combs is a good actor. Mm-hmm. Remember him in The Frighteners?
Yes.
Remember how fucking amazing he was in The Frighteners?
He's so great. From the first scene you see him.
The Reanimator movies, like, he is awesome. And, like, no one's helping him. Like, I have this picture in my head of him walking up to the director, who probably barely spoke English, and was like, so why is my character here? Like, he's a doctor. that's my character. He's a drunk doctor, and he's at the church. Why? What is his relationship to anybody else? Why is he so loyal to a fault to this? Like, just on a basic fucking storytelling standpoint, why am I here? And nobody would have an answer for him. Mm-hmm. So, like, what can he do? Like, what can he do?
Why are you attacking that human in the room with you when the room is full of monsters?
That's what they're paying me to do today.
So
the booby-trapped graveyard. She's Ashley Lawrence has set the explosives. I don't know how they're supposed to light and explode as soon as a creature is nearby. Like, I don't know who lights the fuse. Doesn't matter. But it's sort of interesting because when our hero, who we haven't mentioned yet, who is the worst actor in the movie, John Finch as Bennett, who looks scared of the camera. Like, he can't fucking look at it. Like, he's actively looking away from it at all times. He's like, please don't do it. Please don't look at me. Please don't look at me. He's the main character. He's coming in to try and steal treasure from a grave, but she's booby-trapped all of these graves. So, natural conflict here, but the bombs just go off randomly. When the script needs them to, an explosion happens. It's just so frustrating. And I'm sorry, John Bennett. Maybe you or John Finch, pardon me, who's playing Bennett. Maybe he figured himself out and got this thing to work later on down the line. But in a cast where nobody comes off well, he comes off brutal. There's also the father, Paul Mante, his character, again, as an actor. So, I live at this old church. I know that these old preachers are coming up here. And I guess my thought is, if I let them kill me, maybe they won't kill anybody else. I guess, was maybe. But over and above that, he was shitty to everybody else. All these people that he's going to sacrifice his life to, he hates them. But when the monster appears before him, he shows it so much respect. It's just like... And then he dies and it doesn't matter. And it's just like... How hard is it? Like, honestly, just go, like, Demon Knight level. Like, go dumb, let the monsters attack, go gory, and have it happen so quickly that we don't have time to think about the sweating of the dynamite or, like, why things are exploding when. But it's amazing how there's so much air in the proceedings on top of everything else. Like, there's a lot of characters and a lot of stuff happening, but it fucking takes forever. It takes forever. And the creature design, which I have given up, it looks really cool. It's also kind of a bit of a mask. They don't articulate very well. Mm-hmm. So, on one hand, yes, I like the look of it, but on another hand, we lose some of the expression when they're actually speaking. Yeah. And maybe that's why they made a choice to not have them speak so much. Oh, and not that it matters, but the kid who came here to get the treasure is one of the monsters through his bloodline. Somehow.
Yeah, he's a Martense, isn't he? Yeah.
Because that always happens in H P Lovecraft movies, but why he didn't know this and why he isn't a monster, I don't know.
Yeah. So, to sum up, performances that are more wooden than wood, absolutely senseless character and dialogue, bad understanding of explosives, randomness. They took everything that was cool out of the lurking fear and left the monsters, and there's nothing left. Wikipedia says the director went through a rough patch after this movie came out and felt he could have done better. I agree.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I looked at his career and I looked at Stuart Gordon's career, and yeah, you can see that he didn't have a lot to work with, admittedly. But again, you might have, been able to scratch out a passing grade with just a minimal amount of effort.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like we have all these pieces and that'll be good enough. What are we doing today? Whatever. Like, it really felt like nobody cared. And that sucks for me. Usually when I hear, like, Jeffrey Combs talking about an H P Lovecraft project, you can tell he's excited about it. And, he's built his career largely on these sorts of things. So this should be another, notch in his belt. It should be another medal for him to proudly wear. It's terrible. It has no right to be this terrible. It is so terrible that if it was a little bit worse, it would be better. Because we could laugh at it and enjoy it for how terrible it is.
This was in the 90s, too, when screenwriting was one of those things that people thought, oh yeah, I'm going to write a screenplay and make it rich. And really people were interested in finding wealth and fame through screenwriting. There's screenwriters everywhere in the 90s. Why couldn't they have found somebody for this? I don't understand.
They just got so used to cutting corners that they were more focused on cutting corners than the product.
Mm-hmm.
That's my only guess, and I'm guessing.
It's in the static, it's in the moisture, it's in here, it's out there. And what's out there is in here now.
Everything's under control.
Why are you so in denial? That thing from the meteorite changes everything around it.
It's just the color. But it burns.
Do you believe me now?
I don't know what I believe anymore.
They're not my family.
The color. The color.
Everything's gonna be A-okay.
So we're getting into more modern takes on Lovecraft here. So I guess I'll start by the sad story of Richard Stanley. Are you familiar with this director?
No, tell me more.
He did a couple of movies in the early 90s, one called Hardware, about a robot, and one called Dust Devil, about a dust devil, that were both okay, but stylistically, like, the direction was the thing about the movies. They looked really good. And he finally got his big ticket into Hollywood. He gets hired to do a remake of The Island of Dr. Moreau. And yeah, you see where this is going.
Yeah.
Marlon Brando, this is going to be amazing. Val Kilmer, two of the most evil sons of bitches to ever act are in the same set together and actively try to destroy the movie. Stanley gets fired something like 2 or 3 weeks into production. It's such a nightmare. There's actually a documentary that you can watch about the making of this movie. John Frankenheimer gets called in to finish production. He ends up leaving the thing and like hating everybody involved. And Brando was well past his best before date, but Val Kilmer was just in full-on self-destruct mode. Mm-hmm. He was the biggest star in Hollywood. He was getting divorced, and he hated everyone. He was impossible. So he got somehow blamed for The Island of Dr. Moreau, and his career was gone. Until Color Out of Space. Elijah Wood's production company wanted to do this take on H P Lovecraft, and they wanted somebody really visual. And somebody remembered Richard Stanley. And that would be an interesting marriage. And I don't think they're wrong. I think he was a really good choice. And after this, they were going to do a bunch more Lovecraft adaptations. And then Richard Stanley started beating his wife or whatever, his person he was living with, and he got cancelled. And so did the rest of his career.
Oh, okay.
Such is the sad tale of Richard Stanley. So Color Out of Space will probably be his last sort of statement into film and the horror genre. And that's too bad, because I do think that there's some talent here. And I would have liked to see him do, because he said he was actively interested in doing more Lovecraft, too.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know. I feel like we might have missed out on something here. I don't know the full details of why he was cancelled, but all of this stuff is swirling around The Color Out of Space. Add to that insanity, Nicolas Cage. Now, Nicolas Cage has finally dug himself out of the sort of shame spiral that he was in. He was spending his money faster than he was making it, and he ended up putting himself in a position where he just wouldn't say no to projects, and spent 10 or 15 years doing direct-to-videos, saying yes to everything. And usually he would at least try to do something with the material, but there was enough shitty movies in that his star had dropped immeasurably. Like, you remember in the 90s, Nicolas Cage was massive.
He was
massive.
big.
So the small sort of comeback train has been happening now that he's getting to the point where he can be picky about his scripts again. He started doing interesting movies like this and Mandy and Pig and getting more notoriety.
He has his time in the gutter, though, has created his own sort of personal Nicolas Cage brand.
That's right. But sometimes Nicolas Cage will eat the movie he's in, and sometimes he will serve the movie he's in, and you never really know until you're watching it. And I think in this case, he was to the task. I think there's a little bit of Jack Nicholson in The Shining, in that Nicolas Cage is crazy the whole movie. Like, before the meteor lands, he's a little fucking crazy. But I do see the change in his character, and I do see his soul being soured by the destruction of his family.
Did you know that Nicolas Cage is downloadable content in Dead by Daylight now?
Oh, really?
Yes. Most of the downloadable content in Dead by Daylight is either original creations or iconic horror characters like Freddy or Laurie Strode or Pinhead or whatever, but Nicolas Cage
is just
Nicolas Cage.
Well, he's actually played Nick Cage in a movie now.
Yes.
But I was worried again, will Nicolas Cage eat this movie? And he does not.
So you think his performance was good?
I think it didn't eat the movie. Yeah. I don't think that when I walk away from it, Nicolas Cage was the thing that I remembered. What I remembered was the actual earnest attempt at visualizing the color out of space.
Yes.
Which has not been done better in any movie yet.
I remember one or two lines delivered by Mr. Cage that kind of gave me a giggle.
Right.
But other than that...
Yeah, that'd be a great idea, hon. He's like just overplays it just a little bit. But
yeah. So we have, a fairly faithful adaptation of The Color Out of Space.
The modernized, but that's about it, right?
Yeah, well, the original is through the eyes of an outside investigator who visits people in this backwoods farm, whereas this version tells the story through the eyes of the modern liberal farmers who have alpacas and new ideas.
But the environmental investigator is still a character in the movie.
Correct, yes.
But not the main character, yes.
Yeah. As for the other actors in it, the daughter, played by Madeline Arthur, plays someone named Lavinia. Her performance is really reminiscent of Blair Witch 2, Book of Shadows, the irritating Wicca character, Erica. Just not only in appearance, but also just, I think she studied this role.
The vibe is there, but I would say I think that she's a much better actress than the actress from Blair Witch.
Yeah, but you can take anything from Blair Witch 2 and say it's much better than
this
blank.
Is better, yes. Fair point.
And Tommy Chong is basically just Tommy Chong. Not really sure why he's even there.
Well, again, that was another one of the casting choices. When you saw his name, you're like, is that going to completely pull me out of the movie? Mm-hmm. And I don't think it does. I mean, he is unmistakably Tommy Chong, but I don't think he pulls me out of the movie in a way that I feared he would.
Mm-hmm. Good special effects in this.
Very good special effects.
We see some stuff that we've never seen before. The Color Out of Space, which is purple in this rather than green. You can't actually show a color that doesn't exist on film. They went with purple instead of green like it is in the book. Anyway, the color...
It's this sort of neon 80s purple. It's interesting.
Yes. It seems to meld things into other things. And there's a very disturbing pile of alpacas that seems reminiscent of The Thing.
It would have to have been a deliberate sort of like the design of the melded alpacas look very similar to the melded dogs in The Thing.
Yes, and the melded mother and son I found particularly disturbing as well.
Very much the ick body horror sequence of the entire movie.
And those noises that they make together, really distasteful. Another great thing about this show is we get to see the worlds beyond the veil at one point. We get to see the writhing tentacles that go on in the other dimension and see what's waiting for us in the
other side,
in the universe that's going to squish us if it cares to pay attention to us. And I like at that point we hear the notes of pipes being played, as though it's the minstrels playing for the mad god Azathoth, as is talked about in H P Lovecraft stories. It's nice. It's nice that the
Stanley has done his reading. Oh, for sure.
Well, the composer must have read some Lovecraft too in order to incorporate that, and we like it when composers do the legwork too, not just the actors and the director.
Well, and they married physical and CGI effects very, very well. Mm-hmm. Like when the mother and son get sort of transmuted into each other, it's a special effects CGI light show. But when they're up in the attic, that's a physical special effect. And both of them are really well done. Like, I don't want to be one of these guys who say never use CGI, because sometimes it's absolutely appropriate to use CGI, but make a decision and have a reason why you're making that decision.
Mm-hmm.
And also, as much as I want to compliment the special effects, which are great, the whole hue of the movie is good, I think a really good job is done on the psychological deterioration of the family too, in that everything is clearly going terribly wrong and nobody is leaving.
Yes.
And in another movie you would just be screaming, well, fucking leave! What are you doing? What are you doing? And instead they're just like, Benny's in the well now. And that's how life is now. Right? Like, we just accept our fact that our son has been consumed by the well, and if we want to go talk to him, we'll go talk to the well, and that's what life is now. And whatever new horror, that's what life is now. And why they've committed to that, we don't know, but it's part of this color out of space.
Yes.
And it's unspoken, but somehow we accept it. It's not like that other movie where we're saying, get the hell out of here, what are you doing that for? Why? The whole universe is why. The whole universe is like changing in front of them. And
even in the original Lovecraft story, you're saying to the poor farmers who are there, get the hell out. There's no reason to be there.
Yeah. We live here. This is our home, so we're staying. But you'll die, but we're staying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I would say that this is a pretty solid adaptation. It gives us the grounding and the existential dread, the weirdness, basically everything that I'm looking for in a Lovecraft show.
Yeah. And patient too. Like, we see the little boy staring at the well and we know something's off. And we see a few insects at first, like, that clearly don't look like they belong here.
Mm-hmm.
And then the plants start to look a little bit weird, and then all of a sudden this snowball effect, the purple light is everything eventually.
Yes, correct me as well. The plants are they come in subtly as well, and at no point during the production does anyone say, whoa, look at all the weird plants growing around here. It's just you see them in the background. It's
part of the design. It's just part of the production design. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I mean. And it has this psychological effect, and I think that it feeds into why we don't fight with the family.
Mm-hmm.
We're stuck here because this is where we are, and that's a good enough answer somehow.
Yes.
And that's a hard thing to accomplish. And again, if you're distracted by Nick Cage or Tommy Chong, I think that's unfortunate, but I don't think they spoil the meal here. I do think that there are certain actors that are so big that they can kind of hurt suspense in certain movies. You just don't fear for the actor the same way you would if it was like a no-name. Mm-hmm. And maybe this movie didn't need Nicolas Cage, but he didn't hurt this. It sounds like I'm trying to talk shit about Nicolas Cage. I'm really not. I actually do generally enjoy Nick Cage. Just sometimes you have to be careful how you use the guy.
I think I'm glad he's there.
Yeah.
Right? He's not.
He can play mad, for sure.
And he's not one of those actors that you're sure is going to live through the movie either.
That's right. Yeah. And I don't know. We liked Family Out. I guess I can feel that you weren't vibing on the daughter.
I'm traumatized by Blair Witch.
She is that wicked chick, right? She is that 100%, and that's like nails down a chalkboard to you. But I felt for her in that she seemed to be she hung on to her sanity the longest, and as a result, I feel suffered the most.
And she does eventually end up giving in.
Yeah, it's a worthy watch. I mean, yeah. Positive review.
Question for you?
Yes.
And not to give my hand away here, but has there been a more successful and a faithful adaptation of Lovecraft yet?
Well, again, we talk about vibe. I think this is pretty faithful to the story. It's just basically modernized. I don't remember. It's been a long time since I read The Color Out of Space, so I might be pulling this a little bit on my ass. But I don't remember when I watched the movie either time having any scene jump out as saying, no, this is wrong. This is so.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And that does happen with other movies. This doesn't feel Lovecraft to me. Mm-hmm. This does feel definitely Lovecraft. Maybe I'll stand by what I said with The Resurrected being closer to the, quote, experience of reading Lovecraft.
Yes.
But this is closer to the experience of feeling Lovecraft.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Mm-hmm.
To the most brilliant minds Myskatonic's ever known.
Cheers! Crawford!
Hey!
What is wrong with you?
Mr. Tillinghast!
Professor Gordon said there's some components missing from his lab. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?
Of course not.
What is this thing?
The Resonator. We did it.
The Resonator, Mystikonic You. Full Moon Features produced a lot of the Lovecraft adaptations, some of which we've already talked about earlier today, or The Lurking Fear specifically, we talked about earlier today. And again, micro-budget company. I got my hands on this, and I thought, I'm going to watch this with Jeremy, or at least somebody else who's like into the Lovecraft. So this very night, when Jeremy came over to record, I watched this movie for the first time. Jeremy watched it for the first time with me. And I went in with my expectations basement low, which is probably a good thing to do. And as we were watching it and heckling it and laughing at it a little bit, I was haunted by the fact that despite we were laughing at it and poking holes in it and making fun of stuff that deserved to be making fun of, it was still considerably better than I expected it to be. So what is my sickness that I would pay $12.99 for this movie that I had no faith in simply because it had the most tenuous connection to H P Lovecraft? Does this say something good or bad about me? Are we still friends having watched the film?
Well, you've got a problem, Larry. And I think you need to admit it to me and to yourself before you can move on from it.
The first step is admitting that you have a problem. I have a problem with H P Lovecraft.
And maybe buying shitty movies, too.
It feeds my podcast.
Indeed. So, boy, the plot of this one. So
I think it's basically a sequel to From Beyond, in which the machine that was built in that film, the Resonator machine, which is like a big tuning fork hooked up to a bunch of old computers would hit the certain tone and allow people to see the beyond, the parallel universe or the other dimension or whatever. And they looked like, in the original one, sea creatures kind of floating around in the air, like holograms or something. And they recreate that pretty specifically here in a way to try to tie themselves to a movie that they don't really have any direct creative contact with.
Mm-hmm.
And it was originally produced for as I think a pilot for a TV show, and then was repurposed and cut down into this like hour and 10-minute movie.
So, in our first scene, our hero and his friend are turning on the resonator. They successfully do, and his friend dies. His head is bitten off.
Yes.
So then he decides he's going to turn it on again with more friends in the room.
Yes.
Because...
Never explained.
Okay.
Also, considering they're all attending Mystikonic University, his friends are so thick. Like, how many times does he tell them that the resonator stimulates the pineal gland that lets them see the beyond? And then they repeatedly ask him, so what does this thing do? And then he tells them again, and then another character will say, yeah, but what does it do?
And then another one will say, okay, I get it. It stimulates the pineal gland. This is amazing.
But, yes, that is stupid. But I was laughing at it while it was happening. Yeah, like... You can tell that it's made very cheap, but we're at a stage where you can make cheap movies look okay. They don't have that, like, terrible grain or that audio hush or, like, some of the, like, no-budget movies, like, 60s, 70s, and 80s are almost unwatchable on a technical level now. Like, they're hard to look at. This movie doesn't have that problem, but it does seem to have a baseline incompetence to it. Which is really mean to say, but like, I can see these actors, they know they're not in a great thing, but they're trying, damn it, and they don't suck as hard as anybody in the Lurking Fear. Like, these are fresh-faced actors, probably one of their first ever gigs, and they're trying real hard to sell us this terrible bill of goods.
Yeah, here's the shame about it, though. The name actor, Michael Perry, called him?
Yes.
Yeah, he is the worst in this. Out of, like, all the cast. He clearly doesn't want to be there. He's delivering his lines so woodenly, and I don't know, his accent is weird. I've never heard him talk before, but he sounds weirdly Canadian.
Well, and it's the and roll. So if you're getting the and roll, bring something, dude. But Michael Perry, I mean, like I say, he was the direct-to-video dude. Like, every other direct-to-video guy has that one movie that they were in that everybody knows them from, and now he just does direct. Michael Perry never had that thing, right? Like,
yeah,
he's always been the direct-to-video guy, so he's a weird choice for your and roll.
Perhaps he was a last-minute replacement, like, you know, it was like, oh, David Warner's coming, and then, I'm sorry, died. David Warner's sick, he can't come.
Unfortunately, he passed away. Or the guy playing the father, who's clearly supposed to be Jeffrey Combs, and they got like the dollar store version of Jeffrey Combs to play that part, and it's just like,
yeah.
And we have a ghost coming back to save his son. I've mentioned it in the podcast before how much I fucking hate that plot point. But I did enjoy watching it, probably because I was watching it with you, and we were just like having fun, like tearing it apart. So like, I have a personal baseline level of enjoyment from watching it, but I can't recommend it.
There's some terrible puppets in this. Like, yes, they have some CGI light, purple CGI light put over top of them, but as far as how good they look, I'm thinking like the octopus in the water in that Ed Wood movie,
right,
where you have to pretend like you're wrestling with it.
Or like they'll be adding special effects in the background, so we're seeing the special effect floating behind the character, but I don't know that they told the actor that there was anything going on behind them, so like the actor's not responding appropriately, so it feels separate in a way that's not scary.
Yep. So let's spoil the ending here.
Please.
Because it makes no sense. And it's kind
There's
of
an
funny.
ending? I didn't think there was an ending, actually.
Okay, so the main bad guy is defeated. He is killed.
He had his head mashed in with a baseball bat, was my recollection, right?
I don't even remember. Okay, so he is dead.
It was 3 hours ago.
Yeah. And then it's the next day, and our hero goes to the school, and he meets his girlfriend.
Only now they're engaged?
And now she's wearing an engagement ring, or is it a wedding ring? It's not really explained.
Like so many things.
Yeah.
It's not explained.
And then his friend shows up, who's not dead anymore. And
Yeah, the guy who died at the beginning of the movie is back. We've gone backwards in time.
yes, he says it's Friday, and so I guess the last 2 days didn't happen. And he's like, and here's my friend, Herbert West. And our lead character's like, oh my god, that's so weird, even though he'd never had any...
He has no reason to know who Herbert West is. It's a big plot point for the people watching the show, but not for the people in the show.
Perhaps our character read Herbert West Reanimator or saw the movie and then was like, what is this fictional character doing in my reality? And then we see the bad guy is still alive too, and I'm guessing he is aware of everything that happened previously
And then when,
as well.
like, this was just the pilot episode, presumably the season would be about, figuring out what happened and why the evil professor is still alive. But we don't care.
Yeah.
We don't care.
Also, nobody died.
Yeah, in the end we have 0 fatalities. That's true. I didn't even consider that.
Success!
Yay! Happy ending. It also considered, like, I know that it's got this mixed thing, like it was supposed to be a TV pilot and then it was made into this, but that, by the way, is the same history of David Lynch's Mulholland Drive, and people fucking bow down to that bullshit. But this movie, I don't even think the pilot episode was complete, because as it stands, I still feel like there's essential scenes missing. Characters will talk about things that they shouldn't know about, and then in the next scene be informed about that thing that they were just talking about in the previous scene. Like, was that put in the wrong order, or was there another scene that happened that explained what? And like
the girl with the PKE meter machine, that we assume detects psychokinetic energy because we've seen it before in Ghostbusters.
And she did mention that she was ghost hunting in the first scene that she was in, when everybody was saying who they were and what they did.
But we shouldn't assume that all ghost hunters have PKE meters.
No. And again, it would have really been an easy thing to include. And it's not like the movie was, running long at this point. Like, I feel like everything that was shot must have been included to get it to the runtime that they had. And yet, it still feels like there's a bunch of shit missing. It's not just about these insert commercial here moments. It's like, no, there was a scene that we needed for this to make sense.
I kind of liked it, though. It's mind watching it. I've seen so much shit.
Watching it with you. And unlike Lurking Fear, it wasn't like pissing me off, man. It was like, oh my god, you guys seriously? This woman just got stabbed through. So they put her on a table, they do the worst CPR that I've ever seen, and then they defibrillate her. That starts her heart again and apparently cures her being stabbed through her body. And the next day, she's walking and talking with the gang completely fine. Like,
in theory, though, that didn't actually happen if time went backwards, right?
But no, even though, like, they came and visited her at her house.
Yes.
She answered the door.
That's right.
Of her own strength, and her hair was made up, and she looked fucking fantastic. But again, you can laugh at this movie, whereas I was having a hard time laughing at Lurking Fear. I was just so mad. Come on, you guys, just try a little harder. I don't know what would happen. I'm sure that there's a story behind the scenes as to why the TV show never got picked up, or that this was a scrapped project, and that somehow cutting it into this and releasing it in the world was a way for them to try to make money back on the investment. Mm-hmm. But they chummed the waters, and once again, Larry swam up and gobbled the shit up.
Yes.
And I dragged you into this trap with me. I'm not mad at this movie, but like I said, I cannot, in good conscience, recommend it. I mean, if you had a choice between this or Lurking Fear, watch this, I guess. But
Yeah.
That's about as close as I can get to recommending. Mr. Jeremy Cook, it's been a damn pleasure having you back on the podcast. Hopefully we won't have quite as big a gap next time. But it's always a pleasure to have you on the show whenever and if we can get you. And to do Lovecraft, this is you're the right guest for the job. I feel like we're going to be close on this, but are we going to match? What was your least favorite of these 6 movies and what?
Boy, that's going to be no surprise. At the bottom is The Lurking Fear.
What?
Because it managed to be terrible and no fun at the same time.
That's right. The fun. Where was the fun? If you're going to suck this bad, have some fun with it. Thank you, Jeremy. Well said.
Then number 5 is The Resonator, Mystikonic U, because it did have some funness to it. It was enjoyable to watch.
Maybe not deliberate, but in the fun, but...
Number 4, I'm putting Necronomicon, because it had some okay stuff in it, but it was on the whole kind of inconsistent, as anthology films tend to be.
It's true. Different directors will do that.
Yeah. The next ones were more difficult to rank, but I'm going with enjoyment here, and it's going to be number 3, The Resurrected, a solid movie, and it was faithful to its source material, and I enjoyed it. Next, I put Color Out of Space, because once again, it was one of the most successful Lovecraft adaptations out there. It was faithful. It didn't piss me off with violating its source material. And it did have me guessing sometimes what was going on, and some good effects. And then I put Cast a Deadly Spell at number 1 because it was super fun, and I liked it.
It's delightful.
Yes.
Oh, it's so close. It's so close that it's one of the middle 2 that we've flopped around, and the 2 that we switched on, I am the least passionate about in the list. Do you want to guess where we flipped?
I'm going to say Necronomicon and Resurrected.
You are correct, sir.
Yep.
And it was a really close call for me because I like both of those movies. But yes, clearly at the bottom, Lurking Fear. Shame on everybody involved. Like, honestly, like I said in the review, the component parts of this movie, I felt like they were most of the way there. They had to be trying to fuck this up or be so indifferent to it. Like, there was enough good things here on the table that it should have been better than this.
Indeed.
Like, shocking. Miskatonic University, the Resonator, it is not good. But it is kind of charming in the way that it's bad. Like, there's, I don't know, a goofiness, sort of a tactile incompetence that you can sort of enjoy. It is laughing at the movie, though, which is why I will stop short of saying it's a recommend. Mm-hmm. But it's that kind of movie. And for those people, you know who you are. If you want to laugh at something, you can laugh at this. I don't know that you can laugh at Lurking Fear. I think you'll be more angry.
Pretty much.
In the 4th position, with some humming and hawing, I did put The Resurrected. I think it's slow to boil. Like, it takes a while to cook, and it just doesn't have the same rewatch value to me. Necronomicon is kind of wonky and all over the place, but it's also out of its mind. Like, there's something a little bit unhinged and crazy about that movie, which I appreciate it. It has echoes of that era's Stuart Gordon vibe. It's not as good as the shit he was doing. Nothing is, by the way. But it's knocking on that door. It's one of these times where I like the movie as much for what it wanted to be for what it is. But I let it edge out the Resurrected, so Necronomicon is in third place. Color Out of Space maybe should be number one because it was like the actual Lovecraft adaptation and it was pretty faithful to it. And like, again, it's a hard concept to sell. It fell out of the sky and it's a new color that no one's ever seen before and it changes everything it touches and it's slowly growing and it's highly conceptual. Mm-hmm. And the movie does a really good job at keeping you in it and having its inner logic make sense. It doesn't make sense, but it makes sense enough for you to roll with the punches.
Correct.
Cast a Deadly Spell it's even hard to call it its own thing because it does seem to have borrowed a lot from the Roger Rabbit aesthetic, right?
Yes.
And it just borrows, elements of Lovecraft. But I don't know, it was just a greedy thing for me. It was all of these pieces, and each individual piece by itself was something that I loved. I love puppets in movies. I don't know why that always makes me smile, but count that as a win. Clancy Brown, even in a shitty movie, I love it. I was singing his praises for Pet Sematary 2 on this podcast. The movie is terrible. He's amazing in it. And again, he's really good here. Julianne Moore won awards for playing twins on a soap opera. Like, she was pretty young in her career, but you could tell she was going places. And this movie was further evidence of that. And Fred fucking Ward, finally in a starring role in a movie, playing like a gumshoe detective and nailing it. Like, again, not enough good things have been said about Fred Ward. And for all of that, and for its unknownness, like, it's almost a lost item. Cast a Deadly Spell is number one for me. It definitely played to my sweet spots, to the things that I look for and like in a movie, and it definitely doesn't take itself as seriously as I'm sure a true blue Lovecraft adaptation maybe would want to. But on entertainment, pound-to-pound value, Cast a Deadly Spell's number one. Mm-hmm. It sucks that those two are the ones that we flipped on because I'm not passionate about those ranks.
Yeah, I can only assume that it was because I had such a passionate dislike of Whisper,
right?
That we disagreed on those two, and boy, did I dislike Whisper.
Well, I agree with you that it was unpleasant, but I just liked how shockingly memorable, like, after the first time I watched it, I was like, I am not going to forget that. Like, that's it stuck with me. It left an impression. Whereas, yeah, the first two stories honestly were very forgettable. That one definitely left some bruises. The third one.
That's true. We saw this together probably over 20 years ago.
Yeah,
and
on VHS.
And the one story that I remembered was Whisper.
Yeah,
and I didn't recognize the other one. It was like watching a new movie.
Yeah.
Still doesn't mean I liked it.
But it does say something that it's memorable anyway. Whether or not you like it, it makes an impression. So many things feel so disposable, in the nouveau age of Star Wars. Remember when we were kids, when we just watched Star Wars over and over and over and over again?
I remember that.
To me, Star Wars is incredibly disposable now. Like, are you going to feel a need to revisit these last few Star Wars movies anytime soon?
I haven't watched Andor. Some people say it's good. Mm-hmm. There's been... I haven't seen Ashoka.
Yeah. Again, this is the age that we're living in. Like, there's a bunch of Star Wars and we're like, whatever.
Yeah. That is, once again, I think, part of the nerdening that happened. I think Disney bought up a whole bunch of properties during the nerdening that ended up turning things that were once sacred into products.
Yeah.
And it was good at first.
Well, will that happen with Lovecraft someday, do you think? Is Disney going to own Lovecraft somehow?
Maybe. I don't see how they could.
No, I think he's safely in the public domain now. So
yes. Mickey should be there. Oh, Mickey is there now.
Mickey's in the public domain. Yeah. Mickey can fight Cthulhu now. Finally.
I think we know what we have to see. Someone, if you're listening
Screenplay idea.
to this podcast, it is now up to you to have Cthulhu come and fight Mickey Mouse. Some sort of symbolic representation.
One great evil versus another.
Yes.
All right, well, if everybody's still sane and they haven't had their reality rattled by the world of Lovecraft, maybe you want to send some feedback at ranknreview@gmail.com. That's ranknreview@gmail.com. I really appreciate you listening to the show. If you enjoyed it, you should check out A Lifetime of Hallmark and the Shelf Shedding Movie Show. Those two podcasts are friends of Rank and Review, and support me, support them, support all of us. As always, I really appreciate you listening. Thank you so much for your time and your ears, and big love from your host and random Canadian, Larry Parsons.